You call yourself my son, and then you hand me an envelope with $900,000 of debt in my name? Those words burned deeper than the hot coffee thrown at my chest, deeper than the betrayal itself. Because sometimes the cruelest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the very people you once trusted with your life. And when family turns your love into a weapon, you're left with a choice: surrender everything you've built or fight back with the truth. Before we dive into today's story, I recommend you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. If you enjoy this video, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0 to let me know how I can make better content for you. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. The mornings in Santa Fe had a certain stillness that I'd come to cherish. The sun rose slowly over the desert ridge, casting long golden stripes across the adobe walls of my house. The cool air carried the faint scent of sagebrush, and from the rafters on my porch, red chile ristras swayed in the breeze. Inside, my kettle hissed softly as I brewed mint tea on the same gas stove my wife once used. It had been 10 years since she passed, but every morning ritual I kept felt like a quiet conversation with her. I had promised her that this house, this small corner of the world we built together, would remain intact. I filled a mug and carried it to my workbench in the shed, where cedar shavings curled like ribbons on the floor. Woodworking wasn't just a pastime, it was my anchor. After decades working as a forest ranger, I found a strange peace in shaping what the forest had left me. The grain of each plank told a story. I sanded the legs of a chair I'd been building for a neighbor, my hands moving in rhythms learned over a lifetime. Order, patience, and care. Those were the rules I live by now. The house itself was modest, but to me, it was sacred. Every wall carried history. Pencil marks of Ryan's height on the kitchen door frame, my wife's embroidered curtains still framing the windows, the photo collage of family camping trips above the fireplace. It wasn't just shelter. It was memory made tangible. To lose it would be to lose her all over again, and that was something I wouldn't allow. Ryan never seemed to understand that. My son was 33, handsome and quick with words, always chasing the next big opportunity. He liked to call himself a real estate investor. In truth, his ventures felt more like gambling with drywall and mortgages. He bragged about flipping houses in Albuquerque, though whenever I asked for details, the numbers shifted like sand. I'd helped him before, paid for his wedding, pitched in for his first apartment, but lately I sensed that my support had turned into expectation. To Ryan, my role wasn't just father, it was financier. Kira, his wife, was different. She was steady, a traveling nurse who worked long hours at hospitals across the state. She never bragged, rarely complained. And I could tell she didn't always approve of Ryan's schemes. When he spun his stories about big deals, her eyes often dropped to the floor. I noticed, though Ryan didn't. Not all my relationships carried tension. My closest confidant lived just across the fence, Mrs. Alvarez, a retired county clerk. She had spent 30 years handling property deeds and court filings, and her mind was still sharp as a tack. Many evenings, we'd chat over the fence about the neighborhood or the state of the county records office. If there was anyone I trusted to make sense of legal paperwork, it was her. She carried an air of order and reason, the kind of stability I valued. That morning, everything felt aligned. The chair legs sanded smooth, the tea warm in my beak, and the sun laying gold across my workbench. I had written my day's tasks in a small notebook: repair the back gate, check the irrigation lines, call the dentist. Simple things, but they gave shape to my hours. In a world that had grown too fast and too noisy, I had carved a sanctuary of quiet work and small satisfactions. Yet beneath that calm surface, a thread of unease tugged at me. Ryan had sent a text late the night before. "Dad, I've got a surprise for you." Just that one line, punctuated with a smiley face. Surprises from Ryan rarely meant anything good. The last surprise had been a request for a loan to cover a shortfall in a property flip. Before that, it was an urgent plea to co-sign a loan he swore was risk-free. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, but my gut told me another storm was gathering. Still, as I stood in my shed with the smell of pine and cedar all around me, I wanted to believe that peace could last. The morning light felt like a blessing, soft and reassuring. I thought of my wife, of the promise I made to guard this house and the memories inside it. I whispered to myself, as I often did, family means safety. The irony of those words would reveal itself soon enough, but in that moment, they felt like truth. I clung to them, unaware that by evening, the very foundation of that belief would begin to crack. If you're still watching and can feel the weight of this betrayal, comment number 1 below so I know you're with me. Now, let's move deeper into chapter 2. The rest of my morning moved in fragments, never quite steady. I tried to focus on the chair I was sanding, but Ryan's text kept replaying in my head like a broken record. "Dad, I've got a surprise for you." The word surprise should have brought warmth, the kind of thing tied to birthdays or unexpected visits. With Ryan, it meant trouble. The last surprise had been a call at midnight asking me to cover an overdraft. Before that, it was a plea to co-sign a loan for a flip he swore was foolproof. My hands worked at the wood, but my mind drifted to every time surprise had really meant debt. I burned my toast while I was lost in thought, the smell of charred bread filling the kitchen. My tea cooled too fast on the table, untouched. Even the clock ticked louder than usual, a steady reminder that Ryan was due any minute. I told myself not to assume the worst, but my gut had been right before, and it churned now like a warning bell. Their car pulled into the drive earlier than expected, crunching over gravel with a kind of finality. Ryan stepped out first. He looked sharp, almost too sharp, in a pressed white shirt and polished shoes, the scent of cologne arriving before he did. He carried himself with the swagger of someone walking into a negotiation he thought he had already won. Kira trailed behind, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the ground. She clutched her purse tightly, as if bracing herself for something. The whole scene felt rehearsed, like a performance they had practiced in the mirror. Ryan entered my kitchen with the confidence of a man who belonged there. He held a manila envelope in his hand, thick and heavy, the flap already creased as if it had been opened and closed too many times. His grin stretched wide, but it never reached his eyes. "Dad," he announced, "I have a surprise for you." The words echoed the text from the night before, sinking deeper into my chest. Kira stood by the doorway, arms folded, her silence louder than any greeting. He extended the envelope toward me, his hand steady. I took it, the weight unsettling in my palm. I slid out the stack of papers, my eyes falling immediately on bold letters. Notice of default. My heart stuttered. Page after page followed. Promissory notes, bridge loan agreements, liens filed with the county. Each document bore my name, Daniel Hartley, scrawled at the bottom. The signatures looked like mine, down to the heavy press of the pen where I always lingered on the H. $900,000. The number leapt out like a blade. I flipped pages faster, hoping I'd misread, but every sheet told the same story. I owed close to $1 million, with payment due by Monday. My mouth went dry. I had never borrowed that kind of money, never signed these papers, yet here they were, stamped and notarized. Ryan leaned against the counter, his tone suddenly businesslike. "It's all tied to the family ventures, Dad. We did this together. You must have forgotten some of the meetings." His voice carried the smoothness of practiced lies. Kira shifted, her fingers tightening on the strap of her purse. She glanced at me quickly, then back down, as if silently apologizing. "This can't be real," I whispered, though I barely recognized my own voice. "It's real," Ryan said, his smile thin. "And if you don't act before Monday, we all lose everything. The house, your tools, even Kira's car. They'll take it all." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But I've got a plan. We just need your cooperation." The word struck me harder than the documents themselves. I looked again at the signatures. They were mine, and yet they weren't. My mind raced through the years, the promises I had made to my wife, the pride I had taken in keeping our home debt-free, the careful order of my records. Now all of it lay under a mountain of forged ink. Ryan tapped the table with his finger. "Don't worry, Dad. If you just trust me, we can protect the house." His tone carried both comfort and threat. I looked at him, at the son I had raised, and felt my chest tighten with something between anger and disbelief. The papers trembled in my hands, my tea long since gone cold. For the first time, my own kitchen didn't feel safe. And if family was meant to be safety, why did it suddenly feel like danger had walked in with my son? If you're still watching and sense the storm about to break, drop a number 2 below so I know you're following. Now, let's step into Chapter 3. Ryan slid the envelope back across the table and began laying out the contents with deliberate precision. Page after page spread across the wood grain like the cards of a stacked deck. There were loan agreements, lien notices, and payment schedules stamped with dates that stretched back 6 months. Each document carried my name in bold letters at the top, and at the bottom, the same signature I had seen 1,000 times before, my own. The weight of it all pressed down like a hand on my chest. I leaned closer, examining the notary stamps. They were official, complete with raised seals and neat signatures. The deception wasn't sloppy. Whoever had arranged this had known exactly what they were doing. My first thought was disbelief. My second was rage that my son, standing across from me, was presenting this pile of lies as truth. Ryan cleared his throat as if beginning a boardroom presentation. "Here's how we handle it," he said smoothly. From a folder tucked inside the envelope, he produced a crisp document titled Quitclaim Deed. The words on the page froze me. It was a transfer of ownership, moving my house, my home, into something called Hartley Residence LLC. Ryan's name was listed as manager. "This is the safest option," he continued. "By transferring the property, we can protect it from creditors. Once it's in the LLC, they can't touch it. We just need your signature, Dad. Then it's done." I stared at him, at the son I'd once carried on my shoulders through these very halls, and wondered how he could stand there with such practiced calm. The suggestion wasn't a lifeline, it was a noose. "What happens if I refuse?" I asked quietly. My voice sounded foreign in my own ears, as though spoken by a man I no longer recognized. Ryan didn't hesitate. "Then they'll place liens on everything you own. The house, your truck, even your tools. You'll lose it all. And you'll have no one to blame but yourself." His words struck like blows, each one calculated to corner me. Kira shifted uncomfortably by the door. Her arms were folded, her gaze locked on the floor, but I noticed the tension in her jaw. She wanted to say something but didn't. Ryan glanced at her briefly, then back at me, his tone sharpening. "You remember who paid for my wedding? Who covered the deposit on our first apartment? You said you'd always support me. This is no different. You owe me." The guilt he tried to stir found no place to land. I felt the burn of anger rising, not against the debts on the table, but against the manipulation in his voice. "I need time," I said, forcing steadiness into my words. "I'm not signing anything today." The mask slipped. Ryan's hand came down on the table with a crack that made the dishes rattle. The calm smile vanished, replaced by something harder, colder. "Time is the one thing you don't have," he snapped. Kira flinched. "Ryan, please," she began, but he cut her off with a sharp glare. "Stay out of this," he barked. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the tick of the clock on the wall. I gathered the papers into a pile and pushed them back toward him. My hands shook, but not from fear, from fury. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake, it was a setup. Inside, a resolve began to form. I thought of the safe in my bedroom closet, of the original documents tucked carefully inside, the title deed, the insurance policy, the will I had written years ago. I would guard them with my life. They were the truth against this mountain of lies. Ryan leaned in close, his voice dropping to a hiss. "If you make this difficult, Dad, you'll regret it." I met his stare but said nothing. Words weren't my weapon now. Silence was. Let him think he had rattled me. Let him believe I was paralyzed. Inside, I was already planning. The next move would be mine, and I would make sure it counted. If you're still watching and shocked by how far the lies have gone, type number 3 in the comments, so I know you're here. Now, let's continue into Chapter 4. When the screen door finally slammed shut behind Ryan and the sound of his car receded down the road, the silence in my house felt different, like a vacuum after an explosion. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the scattered papers he had left behind. My pulse was still racing, but beneath the anger and shock was a sharper instinct. Protect what's mine. I moved quickly to the bedroom, pulled open the closet, and crouched in front of the small safe I kept on the floor. My fingers trembled as I spun the dial and tugged the handle until it clicked open. Inside lay the documents that mattered most: my property deed, my insurance policy, my will, all carefully organized into folders. I lifted each one, inspecting them as if they might have vanished. They were real, intact, and untainted. I snapped photos of every page with my phone and then returned them carefully to their folders, locking the safe once more. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. My first call was to Mrs. Alvarez. She answered on the second ring, her voice firm and awake despite the early hour. I didn't go into every detail. I didn't have the words yet. But I told her Ryan had put papers in front of me claiming debts in my name. She didn't sound surprised. After decades in the clerk's office, she had seen more than her share of family disputes, dressed up as legal maneuvers. "Check the county portal," she said. "Search your name under recorded filings. If he's done something, it will be there." I hung up and opened my laptop. The county's records website was clunky, a maze of drop-down menus and scanned PDFs, but I knew how to navigate it. Within minutes, my name appeared under a recent filing, Hartley Residence, LLC. The manager listed was Ryan Hartley. My stomach tightened as I clicked through. He had filed the Articles of Organization 3 months earlier, quietly laying the foundation for this scheme. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act. He had planned it, piece by piece, waiting for the day he could corner me. Then another memory struck. Back in March, Ryan had asked me to sign a document he called a medical release form. He said it was just in case I ever needed him to handle hospital paperwork. I hadn't thought twice at the time, but the scanned copy on my screen told a different story. The header read, "Limited durable power of attorney." The language beneath it granted authority over financial transactions. I sat back in my chair, the truth hitting me harder than any blow. He hadn't just forged my name. He had tricked me into signing away power. That POA was the key he had used to open accounts, authorize loans, and write my name across $900,000 of debt. I needed confirmation. I drove into town to the notary office listed on the loan papers. The clerk, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, peered at me curiously when I asked about recent notarizations. "You've been here before," he said. I shook my head. "No, I haven't." He frowned, thinking back. "The guy who signed looked like you, but he wore a baseball cap low over his eyes and a gold watch. I remember because I thought it was odd he didn't take the cap off. He signed fast, didn't make much small talk. I asked him to write a statement, and though reluctant, he scribbled down what he recalled. By the time I left, the sun was lowering over the mountains, painting the horizon in orange streaks. My next call was to the sheriff's office. I explained what had happened: identity theft, forgery, the use of a fraudulent POA. The deputy who answered listened carefully. "Keep every document," he said. "Write a full statement tonight while it's fresh. And don't confront him alone. We'll open a file and advise the DA's office." His calm professionalism steadied me. For the first time all day, I felt like I wasn't walking blind. Back home, I placed the originals back into the safe, double-checking the lock. I taped a note to the fridge in thick black ink. Monday, balloon payment. Not as a reminder of defeat, but as a mark of the battlefield ahead. I sat at the table, pen scratching across paper, as I began writing my statement, detailing every step, every word Ryan had said, every threat he had made. My phone buzzed before I finished. A text lit the screen. "I'll be back tonight with my lawyer. If you sign, this ends easy." The words sat there like poison, but instead of fear, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't in years: resolve. I looked around my kitchen, at the walls built with my wife's touch, at the photographs that told the story of our lives. This was my house, and I wasn't about to hand it over. If you're still watching and can feel the tension rising, comment number 4 below to let me know you're with me. Now, let's uncover what happens in Chapter 5. Sunday afternoon brought a tense stillness to the house. The autumn air outside was cool and sharp, but inside my kitchen the weight of dread settled like humidity. I had been pacing for an hour, rehearsing what I would say when Ryan returned. I half expected him to show up with a lawyer in tow, as his text had threatened. But when the crunch of tires hit the gravel, I saw him step out alone. He carried a manila folder tucked under his arm and moved with the swagger of a man convinced he already owned everything in sight. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Ryan slammed the folder down on the kitchen table and pulled out a freshly printed quitclaim deed. His finger jabbed the signature line. "Sign it. Today. Then this nightmare is over." I kept my voice calm, though my pulse thudded in my ears. I placed my phone on the table, screen down, and pressed record. "If I'm going to sign anything," I said, "it will be in front of the sheriff. That way everything's legal and transparent." Ryan's eyes flicked to the phone. His smirk dissolved into fury. He snatched it up and hurled it against the counter, where it clattered to the floor. "Paranoid old man," he spat. "You think you're smart? You're just confused. You can't even keep track of your own affairs. That's why this happened in the first place." I steadied my breath. "I know what a forged power of attorney looks like," I said evenly, "and I know you used it." The room froze for a beat. Kira, standing near the doorway, flinched as if the air had been split. Her face went pale, but then color returned in a rush. Her hands shook, yet she spoke, her voice trembling but clear. "He made me arrange the notary visits," she confessed. "He said it was for refinancing, that it was harmless, but he knew exactly what he was doing." Ryan spun toward her, eyes blazing. "Shut up!" he roared, his voice cracking with rage. His composure crumbled, revealing the desperation beneath. I pushed back from the table, but he lunged before I could move further. His hands shoved me hard across the chest, and I stumbled backward, slamming my elbow against the corner of a chair. Pain shot through my arm like lightning, and I collapsed to the floor, clutching it. The quitclaim deed fluttered to the tiles. Ryan bent to snatch the papers, but I reached into my pocket and pressed the small panic remote linked to my porch alarm system. A shrill siren erupted outside, the porch lights flashing in rapid bursts. The sound tore through the quiet neighborhood, a beacon of chaos. Startled, Ryan froze. The alarm was louder than I remembered, piercing and relentless. I saw shadows moving beyond the curtains, neighbors stepping out of their homes, looking toward the commotion. Ryan swore under his breath, realizing eyes were now upon him. "This isn't over," he shouted, bolting toward the door. He yanked it open, cursed again, and turned back to glare at me, his face contorted with rage. "You'll lose everything by Monday," he bellowed, then slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. His car roared to life, tires spitting gravel as he peeled down the road. The alarm still screamed until I pressed the remote again, silencing it. The sudden quiet was almost as jarring. I sat on the floor, my elbow throbbing, my chest heaving from the effort of holding myself steady. For the first time, I realized just how close I had come to being physically overpowered in my own home. Kira knelt beside me, her eyes red with shame and fear. Without a word, she slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand. I opened it slowly, my vision swimming. Inside were screenshots of emails and messages, proof of Ryan's dealings, his instructions to her, even copies of loan applications he had filled out in my name. It was evidence, hard and undeniable. "He told me to delete them," she whispered. "But I saved everything. I can't keep covering for him anymore." Her voice cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Dan." I clenched the papers, pain in my elbow forgotten for a moment. The betrayal was deeper than anything I had imagined, but so was the clarity. This wasn't a family squabble, not anymore. It was fraud, extortion, and assault. A criminal battle I had no choice but to fight. I looked at the flashing cursor on my shattered phone screen, then at the note trembling in my hands. Ryan thought he could corner me with fear, but all he had done was light the fire of determination. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The son I once knew was gone. What remained was an enemy, and I would meet him on legal ground, where he couldn't twist the truth. My elbow ached, my body felt bruised, but my resolve was sharper than ever. The house was still humming with silence after Ryan's departure, though my body ached from the collision with the chair. I sat at the kitchen table long after dark. The folded papers Kira had slipped into my hand, spread before me like fragments of a shattered truth. My elbow throbbed each time I shifted, a constant reminder of how close the confrontation had come to real violence. The boy I once carried on my shoulders had shoved me across my own kitchen. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about safety, dignity, and survival. The documents painted a story I didn't want to believe but could no longer ignore. Screenshots of Ryan's messages showed him instructing Kira to set up notary visits, telling her which forms to present, and how to frame them so I wouldn't notice. There were emails to lenders in which he signed my name boldly, discussing balloon payments and collateral as though my home were just another poker chip. I scrolled through the messages again and again, hoping to find some sliver of misunderstanding, but the words were too plain. He had forged, lied, and dragged me into debts that would drown us all. The guilt gnawed at me. A voice in my head, my late wife's voice, whispered, "Always protect the family." She had said it often, a reminder that blood meant loyalty. But what happens when family becomes the threat? Was I protecting Ryan by covering for him, or destroying him by exposing the truth? The weight of that question pressed heavier than the stack of papers. Kira sat across from me, her hands clasped tightly. "I can testify if it comes to that," she said softly. Her eyes were red, her voice ragged from crying. "I can't keep covering for him. He's dangerous, Dan. To you, to himself. He owes money to people who don't forgive." I looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then pushed her phone across the table. On the screen glowed an email chain I hadn't seen before. The sender's address was vague, but the words were chilling. "If Hartley doesn't pay by the end of the month, we'll come collect from the old man. He's already collateral." My name was written plainly in the text. I felt my chest tighten. Ryan hadn't just put my house at risk. He had dragged me into the crosshairs of loan sharks who operated outside any courthouse. The air in the kitchen grew colder. I leaned back, trying to steady myself. It was one thing to face forged papers and fraudulent filings. It was another to realize men with baseball bats and broken rules might show up at my door. Kira's voice trembled. "He thinks he can juggle them, that if he sells the house quick enough, he'll pay off what he owes. But if he fails, they'll come here. I've seen the messages, Dan. They know your name." I closed my eyes, forcing slow breaths. My options narrowed with brutal clarity. If I stayed silent, I risked losing everything: house, savings, maybe even my life. If I acted, I risked sending my son to prison, maybe for years. The guilt and love battled inside me, but against them stood one truth. Ryan had already crossed the line where forgiveness could reach. I reached for the pen beside me and began writing a list. Evidence I had, notarized documents with forged signatures, Kira's screenshots, the LLC filing from the county portal, the statement from the notary clerk, and now these threats. Piece by piece, a case was forming. The list steadied me, turned fear into strategy. Kira watched me silently, as if afraid to break my concentration. When I finally looked up, she whispered, "What are you going to do?" My hand rested on the papers, firm and certain. "I'm going to the sheriff," I said, "first thing in the morning." She nodded, relief and sorrow mixed in her eyes. "It's the right thing." The clock ticked past midnight. I gathered the evidence back into a folder, locking it in the safe once more. Then I picked up the phone and dialed Mrs. Alvarez. Her steady voice answered on the second ring. "It's late, Dan. Is everything all right?" "No," I admitted. "But I need your help. Tomorrow morning, will you come with me to the sheriff's office? I need to file a report." There was no hesitation. "Of course. I'll be ready." When I hung up, the weight on my chest eased slightly. The choice was made. I whispered into the quiet kitchen, more to myself than anyone else. "This ends now." The night stretched on, sleepless and heavy, but for the first time in days, I felt clarity instead of confusion. My son had made his choices. Now it was time for me to make mine. If you're still watching and realize how crucial this decision has become, type number 5 in the comments to let me know you're here. Now, Let's see where Chapter 6 takes us. The next morning dawned cold and gray, the kind of sky that felt like a warning. I brewed tea but couldn't bring myself to drink it. My stomach twisted with nerves, knowing the step I was about to take could not be undone. Mrs. Alvarez pulled into my driveway just after 8. She was dressed in her usual neat cardigan, her expression calm but purposeful. "You ready, Dan?" she asked gently. I nodded, though my chest felt heavy. Together we drove into town, the silence in the car broken only by the hum of the tires on asphalt. At the sheriff's office, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as I slid my folder of evidence across the desk. Inside was everything: my written statement, the photos of forged documents, screenshots from Kira's phone, the LLC filing, and the notary's testimony. My hand shook slightly as I signed the intake form, but once the deputy clipped the folder shut, I felt a strange kind of relief. The story was no longer just mine to carry. It was official now. The sheriff himself, a tall man with gray at his temples, spoke with steady authority. He explained that what I had brought forward clearly constituted fraud, identity theft, and attempted extortion. "We'll be opening a case file today," he assured me. "From here, detectives will begin surveillance and coordinate with the DA's office to pursue charges. Do not confront him yourself. Let us handle it." His words landed like both comfort and burden. Walking out of that office, I felt split in two. On one side was relief. I had finally acted, finally taken the step to protect myself. On the other was shame so deep it ached. Turning in your own son is something no parent imagines. I remembered my wife's voice, her plea to always protect the family. Had I betrayed that promise? Or was this what protecting family really meant? Protecting the truth, even against blood. Back home, the neighborhood had already begun buzzing after last night's alarm. A couple of neighbors paused on their morning walks to glance at me with sympathetic eyes. One older man even tipped his cap and said, "We're with you, Dan." Their quiet support steadied me, though it also deepened my embarrassment. My private battle had become public. That afternoon, I received a call from a detective assigned to my case. His voice was clipped, professional, but something he said rattled me. "We should tell you, Mr. Hartley, your son is already under a pending investigation in Bernalillo County for similar fraud." I gripped the phone tighter. Similar fraud. It wasn't just me. Ryan's betrayal was part of a pattern, a trail of deceit stretching beyond my front door. Any last shred of denial I'd been clinging to dissolved. My son hadn't stumbled into this. He had chosen it, over and over. By evening, the weight of the day pressed down. I sat in the living room, trying to lose myself in a book, when my phone rang. Ryan's number glared on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice came through venomous and sharp. "You think you're clever, Dad? Running to the cops? You've just signed your own death warrant. The people I owe don't care about your reports. They'll come for you." I kept my voice even, though my heart raced. "This isn't about debts anymore, Ryan. It's about crimes, and you've made your choices." He cursed, shouted something incoherent, then hung up. My hand trembled slightly as I ended the call, but I had been ready. I checked the app on my phone, confirming the call had been recorded. Within minutes, I forwarded it to the detective with a short note. Evidence of threats as discussed. When the house finally settled back into silence, I leaned against the wall, my breath slow, my chest tight. The truth settled heavier than ever. Ryan no longer saw me as his father. He saw me as an obstacle in the way of his schemes, someone to be manipulated, threatened, or destroyed if necessary. The grief of that realization hollowed me out, but beneath it grew something stronger, determination. The boy I had raised was gone, but the man I still was remained. And I would see this through, not out of spite, but out of duty to myself, to my wife's memory, and to the home we had built. That night I barely slept. Each time I closed my eyes, Ryan's voice echoed in the dark. "They'll come for you." The words crawled under my skin like an infection. I found myself pacing the house, checking locks, testing the alarm system twice, even standing at the window with the porch light on, scanning the street. My house, once a refuge, felt like both a fortress and a target. I sat in the living room until dawn, listening to the refrigerator hum and the clock tick. my body weary but my mind too alert to rest. By morning, I knew I needed more than vigilance. I needed guidance. So I walked next door to Mrs. Alvarez's house, the air still cool from the night. She welcomed me in with the scent of fresh coffee and the warm orderliness that always seemed to surround her. I told her about Ryan's threats, about the fear of loan sharks, and the uncertainty of what came next. She listened without interruption, her sharp eyes fixed on me, as though she were piecing together a case in her head. When I finished, she leaned forward and said, "You need a lawyer, someone who understands elder financial exploitation. I know just the man. His name is Franklin. I've worked with him before when I was in the clerk's office. He's steady, sharp, and won't let anyone bully you." That afternoon, I sat in Mr. Franklin's office, a small room lined with shelves of law books that looked older than me. He was a wiry man with thin glasses and a calm, deliberate way of speaking. I laid out my folder on his desk, every piece of evidence arranged in order. He read carefully, sometimes jotting notes, sometimes frowning. When he finally looked up, his expression was firm. "Mr. Hartley, your son has committed multiple felonies. Forgery of a power of attorney, filing an LLC under your name without consent, attempted extortion with a quitclaim deed. These are serious crimes." The words landed like stones. "Felonies, against my own son," Franklin continued. "The criminal side is clear, but you also need to protect yourself on the civil side. We'll file motions to freeze any attempt to sell or transfer your house. We'll also notify the county recorder's office to flag your property deed against unauthorized filings. That way, even if Ryan tries again, the system will catch it." I nodded, relief mixing with sorrow. It felt like digging trenches in a war I never wanted to fight. Franklin leaned back, his voice lowering. "But understand this, courts and police handle the legal part. If Ryan promised your property to men outside the law, loan sharks, they won't wait for verdicts. They'll come looking." His eyes met mine with steady weight. "You'll need to prepare for both fronts, legal defense and personal safety." I left his office with a list of tasks as long as my arm, but with a strange sense of clarity. That evening, I called a locksmith to change every lock on the house. I installed reinforced deadbolts and upgraded the alarm system to one that triggered cameras and alerts directly to the sheriff's office. Mrs. Alvarez coordinated with a few neighbors, and soon I had a quiet network of eyes watching the street, willing to call if they saw anything suspicious. For the first time in weeks, I felt I wasn't standing alone. Kira visited too, her shoulders stooped under the weight of guilt. She brought more screenshots, more evidence of Ryan's dealings. She spoke softly, confessing that fear had kept her silent too long, but she wanted to make it right. I could see the shame in her eyes, but also courage beginning to grow. Allies were forming where betrayal had once lived. That night, I sat again at my kitchen table, but this time, instead of dread, I felt a steadier kind of resolve. I opened my leather-bound journal, the one I had kept since my Ranger days, and wrote, "This isn't just survival anymore. This is justice." The words looked strong on the page, more solid than my trembling hand felt. I set down the pen and looked out the window at the quiet street. Porch lights glowed across the neighborhood, steady and reassuring. The storm clouds were near. I knew Ryan wasn't done, and his creditors weren't far behind, but I finally believed I was ready to weather it. My house had been built with my wife's gur, my hands, and years of work. It was more than walls. It was legacy, and I would not surrender it without a fight. If you're still watching and can sense the fight for justice turning, comment number 6 below so I know you're with me. Now, let's dive into Chapter 9. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and floor polish, a mix of history and judgment that seemed to settle on my shoulders as I walked through its double doors. Mrs. Alvarez walked beside me, calm and steady, and Mr. Franklin carried the thick binder of evidence he had assembled from my documents, Kira's screenshots, and the sheriff's reports. I had not stepped into a courtroom in years, and never like this. This was no small claim, no civil dispute. This was the trial of my son. Ryan entered a few minutes later, escorted by a bailiff. He looked disheveled, thinner than I remembered, his shirt wrinkled and his hair unkempt. The swagger that once clung to him was gone, replaced by a hollow stare. He was flanked by a weary-looking public defender. For a moment, my heart clenched. No matter what he had done, he was still my boy. But when his eyes scanned the room, he didn't look at me. He fixed his gaze on the floor as though I were already a stranger. The prosecution laid out the case methodically. The detective presented the forged power of attorney, the fraudulent loan documents, and the LLC filings that carried Ryan's name as manager. They played the recorded phone call where Ryan threatened me, his words dripping with venom. The notary clerk took the stand, describing the man in the baseball cap and gold watch who signed papers in my name. His voice was firm when he identified Ryan as the impersonator. Kira's testimony followed. She sat with trembling hands, but her voice carried through the courtroom with surprising strength. She admitted to arranging notary visits under Ryan's pressure, confessed to saving screenshots of his instructions, and handed over the emails where he discussed debts with criminal lenders. When the prosecutor asked why she hadn't come forward earlier, her eyes filled with tears. "I was afraid of him," she said simply, "but Mr. Hartley didn't deserve what was happening. It had to stop." Ryan's defense tried to frame it as confusion, a man overwhelmed by financial stress, desperate to protect his family, but the evidence was too strong. Franklin leaned toward me and whispered, "This is airtight." Still, I felt no triumph as the case built against my son, only a hollow ache that deepened with every page and every word. After 2 days of testimony, the judge delivered the verdict. Ryan was found guilty of fraud, identity theft, and attempted extortion. The sentence was swift: 2 years in county jail, pending additional charges from Bernalillo County, where another fraud investigation was underway. The court also ordered restitution to me for the damages documented, $15,000 plus legal costs, though I knew repayment was unlikely. More important, the judge confirmed legal protections around my property. The house I had nearly lost was secured once again. The detectives also reported that they had intercepted further threats from Ryan's so-called creditors. Messages had been traced and flagged, and law enforcement assured me I would remain under temporary and protective watch. No one had come to my house since Ryan's arrest, and the men who once loomed in shadow seemed to vanish once their pawn was removed from the board. The danger that had stalked my nights began to recede. As the gavel struck, I sat still in the courtroom, my hands clasped together. Relief coursed through me, but it carried grief alongside it. Ryan stood as the bailiff took his arm. He did not glance at me, not once. The son I had raised, the boy I had cheered at ball games and taught to ride a bike, was gone. What remained was a man who had chosen lies and greed over blood and trust. I followed Franklin and Mrs. Alvarez outside, the courthouse doors swinging wide. The autumn air hit me like a baptism, crisp and cold, washing away the stale weight of the courtroom. I paused at the steps, looking up at the sky streaked with clouds. For the first time in months, I could breathe without fear of what the next knock on the door might bring. My house, my legacy, my safety, all were intact. But the cost was etched deep in my heart. I knew the bond between father and son was broken beyond repair. Justice had been done, but family had been lost. I stood there quietly, letting the breeze carry both relief and sorrow. It was not victory I felt, only survival, and the faint hope that from the ruins, I might one day find peace. If you're still watching and ready to uncover the final lesson behind all this pain and justice, type number 7 in the comments, so I know you're with me. Now, let's close the story with chapter 10. Several weeks had passed since the judge's gavel came down, but the sound still echoed in my memory. Now, each morning began the same way, a kettle whistling on the stove, the clink of a teacup, and the quiet hum of my house. The walls no longer vibrated with threats or schemes. The air felt lighter, calmer. I sat at the same kitchen table where Ryan once spread forged papers, but now the surface was clear except for the steam curling from my cup and the journal open beside me. I thought often about what had unfolded, the betrayal, the fear, the long nights pacing the floor and checking locks. Yet beneath the sorrow lay a thread of something stronger, resilience. I had not been destroyed. I had endured. My home, my life, my dignity, though tested, remained mine. That mattered more than I could have realized at the start. The hardest lesson had been about family. For most of my life, I had believed blood alone was the anchor that kept people bound together. I had promised my wife I would always protect Ryan, always put family first. But what happens when blood becomes a knife instead of an anchor? I had learned that true family is measured not by shared names or inherited faces, but by loyalty, honesty, and respect. Mrs. Alvarez had shown me more kinship in her steady support than Ryan had in years. Even Kira, though complicit for too long, had finally chosen truth over fear, giving me the evidence I needed. And the neighbors who turned on their porch lights during the siren, who offered quiet words of encouragement in the days after. Those were the threads of real family, woven not by birth but by choice. I began to think of my story not just as a private ordeal, but as a warning. Too many older parents like me trust blindly, convinced that love alone will protect them. But love is not armor, and blood is no guarantee of safety. I had nearly lost everything because I believed my son's word more than my own instincts. Now, I resolved to speak openly about it. At church, at the community center, even at the diner where I sometimes had lunch, I told pieces of the story, not to shame, but to protect. If my experience could prevent even one other man or woman from being manipulated, then some good could come from the wreckage. Irony arrived each month in the mail. A restitution check bearing Ryan's name rested in my mailbox like a bitter token. The first time I held it, my hand shook. To cash money signed by my son, money ordered by the court as repayment for what he had stolen. It was both justice and heartbreak inked in blue. I deposited it anyway, not out of spite, but as proof that accountability, though delayed, was possible. Each check became less painful, transforming into a reminder that even betrayal has consequences. In the evenings, I turned to my garden. The roses my wife once tended had suffered during the years of chaos, but I trimmed, watered, and replanted. Slowly, green shoots pushed through the soil. The work was quiet, steady, healing. I found comfort in the rhythm, soil under my nails, the sun warming my back, the blossoms returning in color and fragrance. My house and garden reflected what I felt inside, wounded, but alive and mending. One night, as the sun bled red into the horizon, I wrote in my journal, "Justice may cost, but silence costs more." I had paid the price of grief, but I had reclaimed dignity. Silence, had I chosen it, would have cost me everything: my home, my safety, and perhaps my life. Looking around the home I had built, I realized the betrayal had taught me something no father wants to learn. Yet every person must remember, we cannot control what others choose, not even our children. But we can choose our own boundaries, our own truth, our own survival. That is dignity, and it is not negotiable. I set down my pen and closed the journal. Outside, the street was quiet. The porch lights glowed steadily, no longer flashing alarms but casting a warm halo on the sidewalk. For the first time in years, I felt safe enough to exhale fully, to let the evening carry me into rest. My heart was bruised, but my spirit was intact. From the wreckage of betrayal, I had found clarity. Family may have broken me, but dignity rebuilt me, and that, I realized, was the truest inheritance I could ever leave behind. Life has a way of testing the very foundations on which we stand. The moments that shake us the hardest are rarely those we expect. They come quietly at first, disguised as routine days, and then suddenly fracture the illusions we thought were safe. When trust is broken, especially by those closest to us, the wound cuts deeper than almost anything else. But even in the darkest corridors of betrayal, there is a light waiting to be uncovered, one that speaks not of despair, but of resilience. Betrayal is never just about the act itself. It is about the collapse of an idea, the shattering of an unspoken promise. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about love, loyalty, and the limits of forgiveness. And yet, paradoxically, betrayal also offers clarity. It strips away illusions, revealing who we are when stripped of comfort. It demands we choose between surrendering to despair or standing with dignity. The human spirit, when pressed against the wall, often discovers a strength it did not know it carried. That strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, urging us to take the next step, to make the call, to write the statement, to protect ourselves even when our hearts beg us to protect someone else. It teaches us that courage is not found in grand gestures, but in the quiet decisions that reclaim our lives one choice at a time. From these struggles comes an undeniable truth. Family is not only a matter of blood, but of loyalty and respect. The ties we inherit at birth do not excuse deception, manipulation, or cruelty. Family, in its truest sense, is built on trust freely given and care consistently shown. And when those bonds are abused, it is not weakness to walk away, it is wisdom. For genuine connection is not destroyed by accountability, it is strengthened by it. Life also reminds us that silence in the face of wrongdoing is never neutrality. Silence feeds exploitation. Silence allows deception to grow. To protect what matters, one must be willing to speak, even when the words are painful, even when the truth reshapes relationships we once believed were unshakable. Justice may come at a cost, but the cost of silence is always greater. There is another lesson too, one often overlooked. Healing is not the same as forgetting. Wounds leave scars, and scars remind us of the battles we have endured. But scars also testify that we survived, that the pain did not define our end, but marked the beginning of wisdom. The heart may break under the weight of betrayal, but it also expands, learning to value integrity above convenience and peace above denial. From these experiences, a deeper philosophy emerges. Security is not found in walls or locks alone. It is found in boundaries. Boundaries we set with courage. Boundaries that affirm our worth. Boundaries that refuse to let deceit redefine us. Dignity is not gifted by others, but claimed by ourselves when we decide that no matter what has been taken, our truth remains untouchable. Even amidst loss, gratitude can bloom. Gratitude for those who step forward in moments of need, for neighbors who turn porch lights into beacons, for voices that speak truth when silence might have been easier. Gratitude for the resilience hidden inside us, revealed only through trial. It is in these unexpected alliances and quiet victories that we find the true definition of family, not those who share our name, but those who share our burdens. In the end, the story of betrayal and justice becomes larger than the pain that sparked it. It becomes a reminder to all who listen. Guard your dignity, value your peace, and know that trust is precious. Protect it fiercely, but do not surrender it blindly. Love can inspire, but love without boundaries can destroy. Real strength lies not in clinging to what once was, but in standing firm for what must be. When the storm passes, what remains is not only survival, but renewal. Homes can be rebuilt, gardens replanted, and spirits restored. The echoes of deception may linger, but they no longer hold power. What endures is the simple truth that even when the closest ties unravel, we are never powerless. We are capable of choosing justice, of protecting what is sacred, and of walking forward with heads unbowed. The lesson is not that betrayal defines us, but that resilience refines us. Dignity, once defended, shines brighter than any wound can dim. And though trust once broken may never return in the same form, wisdom rises in its place, guiding us to live more carefully, more truthfully, and more courageously than before. These turning points remind us that setting boundaries and valuing ourselves is not just an act of courage, it's the foundation of living with dignity. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What's one lesson from this story that you feel connected to, and how will you apply it in your own life? Let's grow together by sharing our thoughts. If this story resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, feel free to leave a 0. Your feedback helps us improve. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and spark reflection. Thank you for watching, and here's to living life with strength, honesty, and authenticity.